Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live. I'm hoping that Joe Nice will be able to join me again today. We're going to go live together to talk about how to show up and how a guide to protesting, basically. Perfect. There's Joe. Hello.
Catherine, hello, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I've never been better. Never been better. I'm on fire
Good.
today. I'm feeling really good. Yeah, I'm feeling
Good.
really good. My live and direct chat was a bit emotional. I got a little angry. I got a little agitated. Not necessarily about with people in the chat, but about the situation that we have going on in the United States right now. And I let my feelings be known.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I
you
let my
know,
feelings be known.
that's good. That's the way it should be.
Of
Yeah.
course, of
Yeah,
course. I'm a human being just like everybody else, and I have a
of
right to
course.
express myself. So hey,
Yeah,
why not?
yeah,
Why not? So how are
beautiful.
you? How's your week been?
It's been all right. Just busy,
Hmm.
busy, busy. But
Hmm.
yeah, still trying to just mobilize and participate as much as possible. And
Understood.
yeah,
Understood.
it's been wild for sure.
Understood. How's
Yeah,
Otis doing?
he's good.
Good, 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 good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know what? Let's get started because I know there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot. Today's topic is about protests because obviously with everything that's been happening recently with the Black Lives Matter movement and everybody getting involved and feeling like they want to be part of something that's bigger than
Hmm.
themselves, people are out in the streets. No justice, no peace, no racist police.
Yeah.
No more police. People are out and about.
Yeah.
But people,
Absolutely.
but people, but Catherine, I don't think people actually understand what a protest is all about, why people protest, and actually what to do at a protest. Not this
Hmm.
is in terms of not only in terms of procedure, but preparation and post protest. And that's
Hmm.
a lot of P's in one sentence. My alliteration is really good. So I'm feeling, yeah, this is going to be on, we're going to be on fire today. So how do you want to start this off? How do you want to start off today's chat? Please.
I mean, I just want to ask you why protest is important. What is it?
Okay.
Why do we
What is it?
care?
What is it? A protest is a marketing plan for a grievance. It's a
Hmm.
marketing plan for a grievance. So if you, the aggrieved group or the disenfranchised group, say, hey, you know what? Group in power, I have a problem with the way I'm being treated. The only way the group in power will be able to have address your grievance is through a protest. Now, there are various types of protests. Now, we've seen people march. We've seen people walk up and down the street. And that is the very definition of a march, where you walk up and down the street or you walk from one place to another and you hold up banners and signs saying, hey, we want justice or, Black Lives Matter. Whatever the case, whatever you want to express that you don't necessarily want to say verbally, you put it on a sign or a banner or a placard, and you let people know what your issue is. Now, there are rallies. Rallies involve speeches, personal audio equipment, guest speakers, standing in front of a group of people and addressing the masses with what your beliefs should be and showing some sort of emotional, political, and social support.
Hmm.
You have vigils, usually by candlelight. People are nice and quiet. No one says anything. You might light a candle. There might be somebody that might say something in a really low or soft voice, and they'll say, "Hey, we want to make sure that First Nations people get the rights that they deserve, and we're having a candlelight vigil."
Hmm.
And you hand out the information, usually with placards or banners, posters, or cards. Now, there's a couple other that I want to make sure I get into that really are more applicable. You also have a picket line. And the irony of a picket line is that it's actually not in a line. The actual definition of a picket is to walk in a circle. That is the actual definition of a picket, to walk in a circle. And again, the participants hold banners. And picket lines are usually in situation involving labor. Now, the other situation where you have a protest that involves labor is a strike.
Hmm.
Now, a strike is when employees have a grievance with their employer. Now, typically when you have a strike, there are certain people in the world who cannot strike. For example, police officers can't strike. Any sort of employment involving public safety
Yeah.
can't strike. So
First
if you,
responders.
perfect, perfect,
Yeah.
first responders, fire department, can't
Hmm.
strike. It's against
Yeah.
the law, can't do it. Now, there's a specific type of strike that I think we might see more of, and it's called a wildcat strike. Are you familiar with this, Kat?
I'm not actually.
Okay. A wildcat strike is when membership of the group, membership of the union, of the employers, the union, do not consult the management of the union or union leadership to address the grievance with the employer. So the rank and file in the union, not union leadership, but the actual workers, go ahead and directly address the grievance with the employer. So to take this in a sports analogy, this would be, for example, the National Football League has the National Football League Players Association. That is the union for the players, the football players. And let's say, and naturally the football players have an agreement called the collective bargaining agreement, where we, the players, will go ahead and perform these services, and you, the employer, the 32 NFL franchises, will go ahead and pay the players a certain percentage of the revenues earned as a result of tickets, advertising, gate, merchandise, etc. So let's say the union, the players union, says, hey, you know what? We want to go ahead and say that we want 51% of revenues. Let's say the players say, you know what? No, that's bullshit. We want 62% because we're the ones playing the game. The owners are sitting there eating beluga caviar and drinking Evian water for 3 hours every Sunday. The players might go ahead and say, you know what? Nah, the hell with the union. We'll deal with the teams, the league, the owners themselves, our employers. That is an example of a wildcat strike.
Yeah, okay.
I think we're going to see more of them because more and more people are becoming empowered with their own leadership. People are becoming self-managed more and more on a daily basis, and they're realizing that, you know what, I don't necessarily need a labor lawyer with a degree from Harvard or Georgetown or Yale to represent my rights. I know what my rights are, and I know what I'm entitled to as a worker, and I should go ahead and address my grievance directly with my employer, not use a labor lawyer or labor leadership to be an intermediary between me and the rest of my workers, the rest of my brothers and sisters who work alongside of me, and my employer. So that is a strike. There's obviously civil disobedience. We know what that is. We just, you do something crazy, like you sit in the middle of a road or you occupy a particular place. That's civil disobedience. We all know what riots are. And there's two other ones that I want to make sure we understand. There's a boycott, which is a specific type of protest. And the boycott, you actually choose not to use a particular service, or you refuse to buy a particular product. So many years ago, there was a restaurant named Denny's, and they were involved in a massive discrimination lawsuit, and loads of people decided to not eat breakfast at Denny's. They decided to say, hey, you know what, that Rudy Tooty fresh and fruity pancake deal, I can go without that. I'll just go to Waffle House and get my pancakes there.
Oh no, it cut out. Okay, good.
Happened. Hold on a second. And I've got the do not disturb on. But yeah, so a boycott is refusing to buy a product or refusing to use a service. Personally, I think everybody in the world should boycott Amazon because of everything that's got going on with them. So those are the different types of protests. Protests take a variety of forms based upon context and obviously the situation. So that's what we're talking about, protests. And with each of these protests, with every protest, there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be a specific purpose. There needs to be demands made from the aggrieved group to the group in power so that there can be some sort of structural change that takes place over a period of time and a specified period of time. You don't want these protests to be indefinite where every week you're protesting and nothing gets changed from the people in power to the people who demand change. You would like to have some sort of benchmark where you feel as if the protests are having some effect. And yeah, go ahead. You look like you're going to say
ways, I was going to say ways to hold our leaders accountable is
correct.
Really what that is. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, protests, they matter because, again, if the employer is only going to be interested in making money, the group in power is only going to be interested in maintaining the status quo. So if you, the group that is not in power, have an issue with the group that is in power, then it is your responsibility and it is incumbent upon you and other members of the aggrieved party to make sure that you let your intentions and your feelings and your voice be heard and known.
Hmm. I would argue that it needs to go beyond that, but that's the beginning for sure, for sure.
Go ahead. Tell me what you think, because I'm curious to see why you think. Well, obviously it needs to go beyond that, but I'm curious to hear
Yeah.
what your thoughts are behind that.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Like it's a way to get your voice heard and raise
Yes,
awareness and be
yes,
loud and sometimes disruptive, in order to get a point across, to
absolutely.
hold our leaders accountable, like, with our demands or whatever it is. But
Yes,
yeah, but it's not, it has to go beyond the aggrieved group. And that's where we're at now. We
I
need
agree with
to
that.
hold white people responsible because the status quo, pretty comfortable for white people,
It didn't work. Didn't work.
hasn't
It
been
didn't
working
work.
for hundreds of years.
Correct.
Or on the flip side of that, maybe it has been working for them only, for us, for me.
Correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, so that needs to change.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes to my point with regards to, let's say, for example, a strike. Strikes don't necessarily have a racial component to them because everybody is in the same boat, so to speak, in terms of their grievance. And I think
Hmm.
we're seeing that now in terms of what's happening with the protests that are taking place right now. To a certain extent, and again, well, our first conversation, we talked about the four fights. Do you remember the four fights? We talked about them: freedom, equality, humanity, and survival.
Hmm.
Everybody, for the most part, and this thing keeps falling down. It's weird. For some reason, everybody is in those same four fights right now. Everybody has those same four fights. And now we're all kind of in the same boat, but then there are people in the boat who have higher level, more needs than others, but everybody is in the same fight. And the direction of that sort of that sort of rhetoric, that sort of will, that the sort of we need to have something going towards the people in power so changes can be made.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing that, like, it's very much about power in a broad sense, even in a theoretical sense, because
Yes.
yeah, because these protests are a way to push those in power to make changes that they won't make on their own. So,
Correct, correct,
yeah.
correct. And usually, and again, the one dynamic and the one characteristic I think is never really truly understood about power is always felt. You never see power. You always
Mm.
feel power. So you can't see electricity, but you feel the shock when you get electrocuted. You, boy, how can I say this? You could sort of see a tornado. You could kind of see the dust spinning, but what you really feel is the winds, and you see the cow flying off in the distance, or you see a trash can 4 blocks away. That's my point. You don't An earthquake is a perfect example. You can't see an earthquake, but
Mhm.
you feel the tremors. And then as a result, you see books falling off shelves, you see bridges falling, you see buildings collapsing. So again, power is always felt, it's never seen. And I think when people understand that sort of dynamic with dealing with people in power, that might change the level of sophistication that would be needed in order to demand what you should have rightfully as an aggrieved group.
Right. That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you. For sure.
Every once in a while, I have a good point, Catherine.
You
Every
have
once in a
them
while,
constantly, so that's
I
why
have
I'm in
every once
awe.
in a while. Every once in a while, I get something good. Today's one of those days. Today's one of
I
those
mean,
days.
it's
So
every day
we're gonna go with it.
when I talk to you, so meh.
Oh boy, I appreciate that. That's impossibly kind of you. It's impossibly kind of you. So yeah, and what do you want to talk about next with protests? Because again, I think there's a lot of people out here that really want to learn more about protests, and there's been a lot of them recently. There's been a lot of
Mhm.
them. We've seen protests in Hong Kong. We've seen over the past year or two. We've seen the Dakota Access Pipeline, the protests that took place with Native American communities, and the big against big oil, especially in Standing Rock. We saw, oh gosh, we saw the demonstrations in Turkey at Gezi Park in Istanbul, we saw many people who are against their leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. There was a whole lot of people with the protests who are anti-Erdogan, and Erdogan ended up locking up a whole lot of Turkish journalists and a whole lot of dissenters as a result of these protests. The two protests that I think most people are familiar with, other than the obvious ones like the civil rights movement, are Arab Spring.
Mm-hmm.
We know what happened there. Many of the, again, that was anti-government, and many of the leaders in many of those countries across the Middle East and Northern Africa. I know Tunisia changed their leadership, Libya, Egypt, and I think Yemen also had a leadership change as a result of the Arab Spring movement. But the biggest protest that I think we've seen in the past 10 years has been the Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy movement, which then extended to Occupy Wall Street. Excuse me. And most of those protests were about fighting against income inequality and trying to deal with corporate influence in government.
Yeah.
And the Occupy Wall Street movement had a lot of energy, but it didn't have a whole lot of direction because there wasn't really anything that structurally changed as a result of Occupy Wall Street. There was a whole bunch of people standing in front of, quite honestly, Wall Street and any other big business that was in a particular city, and you had people with banners and everything, but the big businesses still ended up fleecing loads of people out of their homes. Big businesses still ended up charging a whole lot of money for late fees when you pay your credit cards late, or they still ended up charging a whole lot of money for having a checking or savings account. So not really much actually changed. And in fact, the situation with Wall Street even got worse because of many of the regulations and obviously the stimulus that took place in the United States that gave $4.3 trillion to Wall Street. And that was this most recent stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even going to talk about what happened in 2008, where the banks got bailed out.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention the Me Too movement and Time's
Absolutely.
Up. Those
Yes.
are big ones.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
the climate justice movement, too. That's
Yes.
been a big one
Absolutely.
last year.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Shame on me for not mentioning them.
No, it's all good.
I can't remember everything.
No, it's all good. That's why this is a dialogue.
Can't remember everything.
No,
But yeah, so I mean, what do you want to? What's next on the agenda with regards to protests?
I mean, I think we should maybe just get into like the do's and don'ts of going to a protest itself,
Okay.
and then we can get back to a bit more of the history at the end if we have time.
Sure. And
Okay.
we're kind of keeping a good pace here.
Yeah.
You know, people protest for obvious reasons, and we explained that in the first part. But again, I don't think people understand how can I say this? How emotionally demanding a protest is, and on top of that, how physically demanding a protest is, and how protesting takes preparation. You just can't wake up one morning and say, wow, I'm going to take the dog for a walk, do some yoga, and you know what, let me go protest. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, it's not like you don't protest as if you're going to go grab lunch with a couple of friends or grab a coffee at your local cafe. Protesting takes some energy and effort, and you actually have to prepare for a protest. So the first thing I think we need to do is know what you're actually protesting about. You just don't show up and say, hey, I'm for climate change. Well, what about climate change? Well, how? In what way? Or Black Lives Matter. Well, yeah, but why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Or, yeah, Occupy Wall Street. Well, okay, so, well, yeah, me too. Well, me too. But what does that mean if you keep saying me too? What are you protesting? Why are you here? What is it about this particular cause that has you out of your apartment or your house and on a sidewalk or on the street with everybody else? So know what you're protesting about. Know your rights. Know your rights. And the rights are going to vary between not only between different states and different cities, but between different countries. Know your rights, because there may be certain things you can do in a protest in one country that you may not be able to do in another country. So know your rights. Remain peaceful. I don't think, again, in the United States, we have, based upon the First Amendment, the right to free speech, the right to peaceably assemble, and the right to address grievances against our government.
Yeah.
And again, right. And again, in the Constitution, the word peaceably is actually there. I didn't make that up. It's peaceably assemble. So you have the right to be in a protest peacefully. Make sure it is peaceful, because nobody wants any conflict. This doesn't necessarily have to be an adversarial relationship at all times with the aggrieved group and the group in power. there's there are times when obviously fighting the power makes sense
Mhm.
because the people in power sometimes have thick skulls and you actually have to fight them, however you would choose to fight them. But I think what might be a more efficient, expedient, and effective way to have your power is to leverage the power and not necessarily fight it.
Mhm.
Leverage the power. So find ways that you can have some sort of commonality between the people in power, if there are any, and then use their power against them. And there are plenty of ways to do that. We could probably talk about that in another video or two.
Yeah, I mean
You know,
that's the responsibility that I feel right now, because white people are the people in power, and we're the ones perpetuating this systemic racism, the systemic
hmm
whatever ism you want to talk about.
right?
Because, I mean, sorry, this world was built for us.
I agree.
So, yeah, so harnessing that is, I think, why this is so timely right now, because we
Mm,
have the time, hopefully the resources. In many places, we have the resources, um,
absolutely.
and it's time for people to address race as an issue, because race is a white person's issue more than it is anyone else.
True,
We're
true,
the ones
true,
in power.
true, true. And again, there's plenty of white people who understand that white people are in power, and there are plenty of people who understand that white people are in power and it's an abuse of power. So again, sure, there are plenty of times when you have to fight the power. I mean, Public Enemy said that 31 years ago in their song. But there are also times when you have to leverage the power. And that might be a more effective way of going about things because, quite honestly, for generations, plenty of people have protested
Hmm.
and tried to fight the power. And because the people in power have power, they're able to crush those who want to take power.
So, what do you
Again,
mean leverage in like a practical sense?
that is a great question. That is a great question. For example, let's say right now we have the situation where we defund the police. Hey,
Hmm.
defund the police, kick money out of police. And I'm not necessarily an advocate of defunding the police. I'm an advocate of decommoditizing the police.
Hmm.
But let's say, for example, with COVID-19 and this pandemic, you have a situation where, let's go with New York, for example. New York has a 5.3 billion with a B dollar police budget. $5.3 billion police budget. And at the same time, there have been loads of hospitals and other community health services that have been cut in order to fund the police department. So it's all well and good to say, hey, defund the police, defund the police. If I were a politician in New York City or New York State for that matter, and I said, well, wait a minute, and I want to make sure I put myself in a position of power to have these sorts of structural changes, or I'm a community activist, it would be as simple as saying, hey, yeah, it's the obvious is, hey, you know what? New York City should have done better with making sure that there's more health services. But in terms of leveraging the power, I would say, hey, you know what? Look, if we had more hospital beds, if we had more hospitals, if we had more money for PPE, if we had more money for masks, if we had money for medication, and if we had more money for EMTs and other types of healthcare personnel, we wouldn't be in this COVID-19 pandemic as bad as other city as bad as we are right now. Maybe we could go ahead and take money out of that police budget, and it's not necessarily sort of a gotcha, gotcha, we tricked you into this. But it's making people aware that, hey, you know what? These sorts of resources, we need to leverage what power the police actually has by saying, hey, look, you know what? You all don't need to be doing all of these silly arrests. You all don't need to be issuing parking tickets for everybody. And look how many of your brothers and sisters have died because you all were greedy. So again, sometimes leveraging the power is showing the people in power the error of their ways and
Hmm.
how their greed can be taken away from them to help benefit others.
Right.
That's what I mean by leveraging power. And I know this is kind of a convoluted answer, but I'm trying to do the best I can with a real world example. But that's what it is. It's not necessarily about always having an adversarial relationship with those in power.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to show them the error of their ways, and if you show the error of their ways with actual facts, rather than just emotional appeals to make a change, that also goes into leveraging the power
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
rather
that's
than
an interesting
fighting the
point.
power.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that's a really interesting point. There is an argument out there, though, that the emotional aspect of it is what gets people to pay attention. So that is an important aspect. It's like the start of it
Of
versus,
course.
yeah, versus like the actual ways that we're going to get results. So, yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for clarifying that. And I agree
It's
that
no problem.
it has to be sort of a leveraging of things to sort of reallocate the funds that have been um, these inflated police budgets for decades. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. There's an old phrase when you talk about government where it's called the levers of power, where there's different, not only different levels of power, but then there are levers of power where, hey, if you execute this one particular policy or mandate, then that has an effect on other areas that had an influence of power. And again, the word leverage comes from lever, where if you have a simple machine like a seesaw, where if you have one side that's imbalanced, the other side comes up, or another simple machine would be a pulley, where if you have a weight on one end of the string, the one end comes down, the other part comes up. So it's leverage. So you don't have this. So with a seesaw, you don't really fight with a seesaw because that's a battle you're basically going to lose. You don't really fight with a pulley or an elevator, for example, or a lazy Susan. If you've been in a house that has a lazy Susan, it's the same sort of theory, because you're going to lose that battle because just the weight of physics and nature and its own construction,
Hmm.
it's a battle that you were going to lose. So, and again, if you take that sort of physics mindset and apply it to these sort of political situations, there are certain political structures and institutions that that were the battle you were just going to lose simply by the basis of its construction and its constitution because the organization might be too big or too well funded or there might be too much corporate influence or judicial influence. So again, in those instances, leveraging the power, working with what is there and trying to change it in your favor would be more effective than fighting a physical battle, not only in the physics sense, but in the political sense that you can't win.
Right. And that's, you basically just described like the institutionalization or the systemic racism that exists. It's like, it's not like the fault of one individual white person.
No,
We're
no,
all in it. This is our world of a seesaw or a lazy Susan or whatever. Like this is
exactly.
just the world we're standing on, and now we're trying to, take it apart, and it's really hard. It's going to be a lot of work. So I agree with you that we need to leverage things piece by piece to like dismantle this structure that we've created in our society, in the world. Every aspect of the world is impacted
Exactly.
by this. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, the common phrase is, hey, we need to dismantle white supremacy. We need to dismantle
Hmm.
racism. No one said, oh, we need to explode racism or we need to explode white supremacy or we need to put a bomb to white supremacy. No, no one says that because implicit or really explicit in the word dismantle, when you dismantle something, you take something apart piece by piece, whether it's a bicycle or an IKEA sofa or an entertainment center in your apartment. You take it apart piece by piece. It is a structure, and it is no different than the structures that create racism and white supremacy.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're right. Like going back to what we were talking about briefly last time too, like words matter. And so like the messaging is really particular in a lot of these movements, and that's for
Exactly.
good reason because there's lots of historical ways in which, we've had to figure it out as activists and
Correct.
organizers and all the things. So Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. That's
Yeah, it's no problem. It's no problem. Yeah, because again, the words that we use, they play a role in how we communicate. And again, if we understand that it's not oh, let's take a sledgehammer to racism. No, because a sledgehammer didn't create racism. An explosion didn't create racism. It was put together piece by piece, and it was put together not only by certain social systems and a social order that made one group of people supposedly superior and another group supposedly inferior, but it was also codified into law in every other instance. And then the laws contained the economic structures that maintained that status quo, which created this structure and infrastructure of racism. So
yeah,
again,
absolutely.
there's an old phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Hmm.
Okay, so you can't just take apart Rome in 20 minutes. It takes time
No.
to take apart something.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and it,
Yeah.
and you can't,
And
and you
that's
have to take
why
it
I've
apart from multiple angles.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's why I've been thinking a lot about how to kind of keep this momentum going in both
Hmm.
my personal life and activist work and out there in the world too, because that's the thing I struggle with the most because we've seen, any movement comes in waves anyway.
Of
Um,
course.
but yeah, the longevity of this within my circles is what I'm really concerned about because I would say most of the people that follow me are white. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I would think so too. I would
yeah.
think so too.
So
Yeah, and it's important that everybody stays vigilant because
yeah,
again,
absolutely.
we have people's attention, and now we have to harness the energy from that attention to something tangible and substantive. It's consider and not just no justice, no police. It has to be more than
Yeah,
that,
yeah, agreed.
and
Yeah.
it has to be more than that. So yeah, there's a couple other things. For example, when you go out on a protest, wear comfortable clothing.
Yeah.
Wear comfortable clothing. I mean, it seems obvious, but yeah, I mean,
And
don't
shoes,
wear
comfortable
comfortable
shoes.
shoes. Comfortable shoes. Exactly. Comfortable shoes. Wear shoes that you're going to be prepared to walk several miles in. So don't wear your Steve Madden or John Fluevog boots. Don't do that. No. If you got a pair of walking shoes or running shoes, wear them.
Hmm.
Wear them. Protect your privacy. Protect your privacy. For example, if
That's a
you're
big one.
taking a picture on your phone, if you take a picture on your phone and you don't necessarily want your picture to be taken, or if you're taking a picture of somebody else, ask permission to take a picture of them. And
Yes.
if they want their pictures obscured, there's plenty of software to use that. There's Snapseed, there's Sketch, Obscuracam, in order to go ahead and blur people's faces so
Yeah.
their identity is maintained. If disable fingerprint access and face access on your phone. Because
Hmm.
if you unfortunately get arrested, the cops can go ahead now because there are laws that say that they can go ahead and look through your phone. And I think they can do that without a warrant. You can just point the phone at your face. They got access to your phone and all of your messages and all your emails and all your phone calls. Encrypt your phone.
Personal. Yeah.
Encrypt your
Oh,
phone.
totally. Good call.
Encrypt your phone. That's another technique. And before you leave the house, back up your phone.
Hmm.
Back it up. So,
Yeah.
because if you lose your phone, you're going to lose potentially any data that's on it and any personal information that's on the phone. So, back up your phone and then encrypt the backup. That way, in case anything happens, police wise or whatever, and they just happen to find your laptop or they have a search warrant for your house, they're going to have a more difficult time to go through your personal information.
Yeah.
So, make sure you do that. Make sure you do that. And then, with regards to filming, it's always a good idea to ask somebody if they want to be filmed,
Hmm.
but you do not have to ask the police to film the police. You don't have to ask that because we as citizens have the right to film a police interaction because the police are part of the government, and the government, it's incumbent upon the government to be transparent. So what better way to be transparent than to film the police doing what they say they're supposed to be doing? So if you notice, the whenever you see these situations with police, the police never say, the police, sometimes they say turn the cameras off, but they usually say back up. And they want you backed up away, far away enough where where you can't really see what's going on, or they actually say, hey, turn away, turn away. You have every right to film a police interaction with another citizen.
Yeah,
Every right.
they're public servants, and yeah, you have the same right in Canada. And
Yes.
I was also going to mention that because if you see something start to go down at a protest, yeah, the best thing is to film the cops and what they're doing and not the protesters,
Correct.
because they can go back, especially if it's posted online. Cops in certain places have gone back and identified people and gone to arrest them after for being in those protests. So
Yes.
yeah, that's a really
Yes.
important one.
Yes. And you also mentioned the cops, and you said, hey, if you see situation happening with the cops, make sure you focus on the cops and not the protesters. Another another tip would be to know where the cops are at all times.
Hmm.
Know where they are. So typically when I go to a protest, I usually like being either next to the lead car that's got the PA system and people talking and leading all the chants, or I like to be slightly in front of the car. That way I can clearly see where the police are. And when I do these videos of myself being at protests, you always see me. There's normally not a whole bunch of people in front of me. There's usually maybe one or two people in front of me, but I can always see where the police are. Because in a lot of these protests that are taking place in Baltimore, the police are typically a block or two ahead to block traffic. So always know where the cops are. Always know where the cops are. And typically, a cop's companion, and you're a dog lover, you have a big dog. Typically, cops roll around with horses and dogs. Stay away from them. You don't know them. They don't know you. Horses can kick, dogs can bite. And you don't need to be kicked or bitten by a dog or a horse. So stay away from them. Stay
Yeah,
away from them.
yeah, I very much agree. Another thing I was going to mention is I definitely appreciate that you go to the front, but just a PSA, white people should not be at the front unless called upon to do so
Yes, I agree.
in these Black Lives Matter movement or protests, especially because you need to be actively decentering yourself as a white person.
I
Don't
agree with
start
that.
chants, but if you are called upon as an ally, that's your time to put your physical body in between police and black folks. So that just needs to be really clear because sometimes I see people just like not knowing what to do and just struggling at like what is happening, what are they doing, and yeah, so you need to know that call to action is call to white allies, whatever words they use to embody that, they
Hmm.
being the fellow protesters or the organizers.
Sure.
Yeah, that's an important one.
Interesting, interesting. You know what, and Catherine, this goes kind of what we were talking about when we started this whole conversation, how there's different types of protests
Hmm.
and how, and again, when we started these tips, hey, know what you're protesting about.
Hmm.
It's interesting how you brought this up. It seems as if these protests have, and I guess every protest, ultimately there's a overarching goal in a protest, but even within the population of those who are protesting, the protestors themselves, there are different roles that people play in the protest. And it's interesting how you mentioned in specifically with these Black Lives Matter protests that, hey, look, white people, you got a different role in this whole situation than black people. And thank you for mentioning that because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that when you're in a protest, you're in this sort of brand new team. And just like with any sort of team, there's a common goal. You wear the same uniform, you play for the same team, you're in the same city, and whenever you're on a team, there is an opponent. And in this instance, the opponent is at minimum the police, but the bigger opponent is white supremacy and racism. So when you're in a team, you have this sort of team environment. But then within a team, there are people in the team whose role has a bit more importance than others. So,
Yeah.
and I'm happy you mentioned that.
There's different positions, like whatever. I don't know that much about sports, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of baseball for some reason. So like,
Okay.
somebody has to be stationed at the first plate and the third plate, but there's also like outfield people.
Base,
Those
base,
outfield
first base.
people, that's white people. You got to stay in the outfield until you're called upon to run in real quick to catch that ball.
Well said. I could. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I wish I had thought of that. So I guess in this instance, given the baseball analogy, Toronto has a baseball team. They got the Blue Jays there, and
Nice. Yeah.
I've been there years ago, and it was called the Sky Dome. It's now the Rogers Center. But
I've
yeah,
never been
the
to it. I
outfield.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But in this instance, if the Black Lives Matter protest were a baseball field, white people are left field, center field, and right field, and black people are shortstop, first base, second base, third base.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. We're
But
kind of
those
in the
outfield
middle of
people
all of it.
gotta rally and run in if necessary. So yeah. So
Perfect. Makes
and
perfect. That's
even
brilliant.
thanks. Yeah. So just along those lines too, I also wanted to
Mhm.
mention like um, in the interest of sort of decentering your whiteness in these physical embodiments of protest, like
Right?
don't talk to the press. That's not your job. And also, like, one
Okay.
thing I really appreciate is like white people should be bringing extra supplies, whether it's first aid, whether it's an extra, bring a couple boxes of granola bars, bring an extra couple bottles of water. That's what your role
Mhm.
is in these instances. Because,
There you go.
yeah, that's on you.
I agree. And you know what, Catherine? It's so interesting you said, hey, bring a couple of supplies. Because then part of the preparation with a protest is not just knowing what to do and knowing, quite honestly, how to behave in a protest, but also
Hmm.
another part of it is what to bring to a protest. Because again, you just can't wake up in the morning, brush your teeth, wash your face, and shower, and then say, hey, protest time. No, it's not that easy.
No.
So obviously with COVID-19, you'd want to bring obviously a mask or some sort of face covering.
Hmm.
I've seen plenty of people wear actual face masks hospital masks. But what I find might be a bit more efficient and a bit more purposeful might just be a bandana, just simply covering your face, covering your mouth and face.
Hmm.
Why? Because in a lot now we're coming up in the summertime. Another item that you'd want to bring with you is a water bottle, preferably a squirt bottle.
Hmm.
So naturally, if you have a face mask, you have to pull the mask down, drink, and then keep moving. But if you have a bandana,
Yeah,
keep it moving.
totally.
And ideally, you'd want the water bottle to be a squirt bottle. You're probably like, well, why a squirt bottle? If you have a
Why
squirt
is
bottle,
that, Joe?
why is that? Exactly. Why a squirt bottle, Mr. Nice? Well, if you have a tear gas situation, an unfortunate tear gas situation, it's a lot easier to squirt water in your eyes and try to get rid of some of the chemicals. Or if there is a flash bang grenade situation and a lot of dust that gets kicked up, the
Hmm.
squirt bottle would have the same sort of function to a certain extent as an eye wash station in an office environment.
Yeah.
So you can alleviate some of the pressure with that. Bring a spare change of clothes,
Mm.
even if it's just a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. For example, again, with tear gas, chemicals get on your clothes. It could keep burning. If you get out of a tear gas situation, you don't want the tear gas and the chemicals to get on your skin. Change your clothes as soon as you possible. So it's always big. You don't necessarily have to bring them with you when you march
Hmm.
or rally, but it's always a good idea to have them whenever you get back to your car. And if you didn't drive, just bring them with you anyway, just in case. Because you never know, someone else might need a shirt. Someone else might need a
Yeah,
pair of
totally.
shorts. Someone else might need
Good
something.
call. Yeah.
Medication. Medication. So if you have asthma, don't leave your inhaler at home. Don't be silly. Okay?
Hmm.
If you if you have anxiety, take your anti-anxiety medication before you leave, and then bring some with you just in case. That way you don't have a panic attack.
Hmm.
So make sure you're properly prepared with your medication. Cash.
Yeah.
Cash. Now you don't need to be walking. You don't need to be making it rain, but at the same time, you don't need to be walking with 50 cents in your pocket either.
Right.
I would probably bring about $20 in cash, just in case. Some of it in loose change, some of the rest of it in bills. Because in some instances, what might happen is there's a whole lot of people filming and a whole lot of people using the information superhighway data. And some of that data is used for ATM connectivity. And there are some instances where you may not be able to use your ATM because so many people are on their phones in a particular area, and it might shut down the ATMs, or it might shut down cell phone service. So if you need money to get a cab, or you need money to buy some food, or you need money to buy some other supplies while you're marching, and you can't use your card, having cash is always useful.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah.
So bring cash. Bring a pen and paper, just in case, because again, your cell phone might run out of battery. And this kind of goes to the next point. Bring a portable battery pack. I have a small battery pack it's maybe this big, so it's about maybe 3 or 4 inches, and it charges my phone up in about an hour, and it keeps me going for another 2.5 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
So bring a battery pack, and it doesn't. You could get them relatively inexpensively. Bring a battery pack, put it, and again, you put all of this stuff in a small shoulder bag, maybe a fanny pack, maybe one of those satchels or a man bag, something small. Because you don't want anything that's really big and bulky, because again, you're going to be marching for 3, 4, 5 miles. You don't need to be walking with an entire bag of books on your back. It's not about that.
Yeah. And if you run into a situation, I carry a backpack usually, which is not ideal. It's a small backpack, but somebody can grab you from behind if you're trying to get away from a situation. So
Perfect. And that was, yep. And that was my next point, Catherine, was make sure that you don't wear anything really loose. So you don't want to wear a sundress. You don't want to wear your baggiest pair of sweatpants. But yet at the same time, you don't want to wear spandex, and you don't want to wear your little back dress that you're going to want to go on a date on. What you need to do is wear comfortable clothing that's not super loose for that exact reason, so nobody can grab you, so you can move quickly and your movements are not restricted. Your movements are free. So in case you need to get away from a potentially dangerous situation, you can do that and not necessarily worry about ripping your clothes apart or ruining your shorts or ruining your pants or ruining your shoes.
Yeah, totally. So,
Ziploc bags.
Yeah,
Ziploc bags. Ziploc bags. Another situation, and I know you wear glasses every once in a while, right?
I do, yeah.
Don't wear contact lenses.
Yeah, or makeup.
Yeah. Don't wear contact lenses because dust, chemicals get inside your contacts and they get trapped, and that hurts. It hurts. I've never had to wear glasses or contacts, but I know people who have, and it's not fun. It's not fun, especially when you get. I've seen people would get an eyelash inside a contact lens, and they're there like, oh my god, what do I do? And they're messing with it. Could you imagine if tear gas gets inside? No, so just don't do contacts, which is why I suggested potentially getting goggles just in case, maybe swim goggles for that matter, just to prevent any sort of dust and gas from getting in your eyes. Oh, wow.
And typically it's a long day. That's why we're recommending all of this stuff. It's a long day, and it is made longer if something happens and you get arrested or rallied or shoved or pushed or whatever into, a dead-end street or something like that. It's made longer by that. So yeah, it's not a good idea to have contacts or makeup.
It's not. And you said you make a long day longer, and it's a long day. And I think part of this preparation in order to do a protest, there's a whole lot of people out here that are not necessarily used to walking 5 miles or used to walking 7 miles with a couple of pounds of supplies and going across different terrain, potholes in the street. You might be walking on grass for a little bit, but then you're walking on asphalt, but then cement or a sidewalk or whatever the case may be. Regular exercise is important. Get your body physically used to that level of physical activity. Because you might think, oh yeah, a little Sunday stroll or a little Saturday afternoon walk amongst a whole bunch of other people, it should be easy. But then after about 5 or 6 blocks, you're like, oh, fucking hell, my calves hurt. Like, Jesus, my feet are sore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, damn it, why are my thighs on fire? The reason why is because you haven't done that sort of physical exercise to build up the physical strength you need in order to do this sort of activity.
Mm-hmm.
So regular exercise will certainly not only help build up your body muscularly and skeletally in order to do that sort of walk, but it'll also improve your cardiovascular conditioning. So after about 3 or 4 miles of consistent walking in heat, you don't feel like you're ready to pass out. You don't feel like your heart's going to explode out of your chest, and you don't feel like you're 30 minutes away from dying.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also why when you walk, you should also be hydrating consistently, just to make sure that your
Absolutely.
body doesn't overheat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't overheat.
So,
And there's something else that you mentioned earlier about, hey, if you're caught in a one-way street and you get arrested. There's stuff that I think everybody should know if you get arrested. First of all, if you get arrested, don't resist, because cops, cops for the most part seem to be assholes, and they're looking for a fight. Don't give them one. If they say, hey, you're under arrest, okay, fine, you're under arrest. Stay calm. You have every right to ask, hey, what are the charges and where am I being taken? What are the charges and where am I being taken? Why am I being arrested? Last week, there was a CNN reporter named Omar Jimenez who was arrested in Minneapolis. His first question to the police officers when they put him in handcuffs were, why am I being arrested? The next question was, hey, where am I going? Where are you taking me? Because I have a right to know. That way, if I need people to get me out, they know where they can find me. If if you are injured, you have every right to seek, ask, and demand medical attention. They just can't leave you there with a broken arm. They have to bring people to make sure that you get the medical attention that you need. Also, make sure other protesters know your name and want and age before being detained. And you should ask, am I being detained?
mm-hmm.
Ask that question specifically. Make sure other protesters know who you are. Hi, I'm Joe Nice, 44 years old. Here's my phone number. And that's
Mm-hmm.
it. Then you get detained, and that's what happens. And the cops need to tell you where you're going to be taken. Oh, we're taking you to the local precinct, or you're taking you to the central booking. They need to tell you that information. Now, once you're arrested, don't say anything. Don't say anything, because at least in the United States, Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment of the United States is basically pleading the fifth. So it prevents you from self-incrimination. They are the ones that have some reason to believe that you committed a crime. So it is incumbent upon them to prove what crime you actually committed. You are not obligated to help them solve the crime they think you did.
Mm-hmm.
That's not your job. Their job is to figure out what crime you actually committed. And if they didn't commit a crime, then that's a whole other set of conversations that, quite honestly, I'm not necessarily qualified to have because I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, me
But I do
neither.
know this much. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know this much in the couple of times I've been involved with police. No, I'm not saying anything. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying anything because you think I did something. I know I didn't do anything. Because again, there's Miranda rights, and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. So if you don't say anything, that's it.
Yeah.
Don't say anything. The police are not your friends. The police are not there to help you. They're there to arrest you. They're there to arrest you. And, and again, the more that I think people understand that police are there to arrest you and they're not necessarily there to help you, don't give them any more help than they think they're going to get out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give them anything.
Yeah.
So if they ask you a question, I need a lawyer, please.
Mm-hmm.
I need a lawyer, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't say
No,
anything.
that's great. Those are all really, really good tips. Um, so the other thing I wanted to mention, we're almost out of time here. We only have 6 minutes left, but
Yes.
I wanted to just mention after a protest because
Okay.
they tend to be long days, and
Yes.
you should have someone to check in with after
I
you
agree.
are done.
I agree.
Yeah, and that person should not be also at the protest if possible. Um,
Perfect.
and it's stressful going to a protest and being out in the street for a long day like that. So take care of your mental health. Check in with yourself that night. do self-care, whatever you need to do, deep breathing, meditation, journal it out, whatever you need to do, just take care of yourself for that
Agreed.
day or that evening or the next day, however long you need, because
Absolutely.
it's it gets to you after a while, especially in times like these where there's things going on constantly and it's you have to kind of be engaged all the time.
Correct.
It gets to
You're
your mental
constantly
health.
on. You're constantly on, and that sort of mental, that sort of drain on your mind affects the energy in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's where the phrase mentally tired comes from,
Hmm.
because that your mind is tired and it affects your body's energy
Hmm.
to get up and do stuff the next day.
Yeah, like your adrenals get drained really quickly and
Yes,
because you're like
absolutely.
on edge the whole day. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, just kind of, is as an aside, I guess, is just for those who are not in cities and not in places that are able to protest, or if you have, health issues or can't attend for any other reason, there are tons of things that you can still do.
Such as,
Post and share things all the time, events, things like
okay,
that. Support the organizers.
yes,
Um, I've been thinking about sort of organizing. I've attended a few, and I think I can organize. It wouldn't be hard to organize an email blitz where you and a few friends just go online. You meet up on whatever platform, video chat, whatever, Facebook Messenger, whatever. Email, just talk about it. Email template, just send it out to as many of your officials as you can,
absolutely.
organizations, people like brands even that are actively against these movements or have
Sure.
done things like pledge large sums of money to the Republican Party, which is not a thing that I appreciate at all.
Not cute. It's not cute. Not cute on any level. No, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. So, and
No,
sign
ma'am. Yeah,
petitions, donate to organizations if you have the means to do so. That's another thing. That's
absolutely.
these people are professionals and they are doing this as a job.
That's what they
So
do. That's what
yeah,
they
it's
do
what they
full
do.
time.
They're
That's their
yeah,
job.
yeah. So they're the ones
It's
that
their
need to
thing.
be funded right now. Yeah, because a lot of
It's
them
their
are
thing.
grassroots and running on very low budgets.
Yes, 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 absolutely. A couple of other things that I wanted to mention about after the protest before we shut it down for today. Lead the protest in a group. Don't lead by
Mm,
yourself.
yeah.
Again, the phrase is called there's strength in numbers. There's strength in numbers. Don't go to a festival alone. Not a festival. A protest alone.
Yeah.
Go with somebody, preferably more than one other person.
Hmm.
Make sure you all have an escape plan and you know where you're going to meet in case shit happens.
Hmm.
Know you're going to meet at the corner store on 8th Street and 34th Avenue or wherever it is.
Yeah.
Have this stuff planned out ahead of time. It's no different than when you were living at home with your parents and you said, hey, look, let's have a meeting point outside the house in case there's a fire. Same sort of situation applies.
Hmm.
Leave the protest safely. Don't run. Make sure you walk away from where the danger is, if there is any potential danger, and make sure again you walk in a group with a group of people. Again, strength in numbers. Make sure again. Last part is to share your story, however
Hmm.
you share it. So if you're an Instagram person, share your pictures. If you're a Facebook person and you have a narrative that you'd like to let everybody know about, share that. Make sure you share your story. And and again, a protest is it is work. It takes work to protest. But there is I don't want to necessarily want to say it's fun to protest, but there is a feel good aspect of protesting because
Yeah.
that feel good aspect knows it comes from a place of being a part of a community that's bigger than you, and you know that what you're doing is altruistic and it is morally correct.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and that is something I wanted to close out with, because yeah, it's really important to remember all this stuff that we spoke about today, but at the same
Absolutely.
time, it's not to scare you because it is. It's very fun to sort of to walk along the street with like with people that have the same ideals as you, and it's, you know, you're making friends, you're talking to other people. It's there's a community aspect, like you said, and it's really quite lovely. So yeah.
It is, and it feels good to connect with people in that sort of way.
For sure.
Yeah, it feels good.
We're gonna get cut off, Joe, but thank you so much again for having this conversation.
You're the best. We'll do it again next week.
Yes, we
will.
Love
you too.
Okay.
You're the best. Talk again soon. All right. Bye-bye.